Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. This Saturday is UFC Fight Night Las Vegas, and in the main event, we have Petr Yan versus Merab Dvalishvili, and this is going to be my full breakdown and prediction for this amazing bantamweight matchup. And thank you to the MMA gods that this is not at the UFC Apex. This is going to be at a small venue in Las Vegas. That's why they're not calling it UFC Vegas 71, because it's not in the Apex. But I'm so happy that you have such a great bantamweight fight, and there will be a crowd for this fight. It really deserves it. This is an amazing fight. This is two top 10 ranked bantamweights, two top 5 ranked bantamweights. And it's a style clash because you have Petr Yan. While he's super well-rounded, he's primarily a striker. You have Merab. We know what Merab wants to do. He wants to come in, clinch up, hold you against the fence, take you down, control you on the ground, and beat you up on the ground. And that's what makes this fight so interesting. And then you have the fact that I never thought I would say this, but this is kind of a must-win for Petr Yan. He's lost 3 out of his last 4, no matter how you want to look at those fights, which we'll talk about each one of those fights in a minute. But he's kind of in a weird spot where, there's a scenario where he loses this fight, and he's now lost 4 out of his last 5 fights in the UFC. As crazy as that sounds, that is the truth, regardless of how you want to, put context on those losses, which we will do in a second. This is a must-win fight for him. He has to beat Merab Dvalishvili, and that's no easy task. Merab is on a massive win streak. He's coming in over a win over Jose Aldo, which I'll also talk about in a second. And, he's kind of in a weird spot because Aljamain Sterling is his main training partner and friend, and he said, I'm not going to fight Aljamain Sterling. But there's been hinted at for a while that Aljamain Sterling may go up to 145 pounds. We all know Aljamain Sterling is taking on Henry Cejudo at UFC 288 in, I think it's May or June. I can't remember. I think it's May. And if he wins that fight, there's a chance he goes up and fights for the featherweight title. And if Merab wins this fight, he's right in line for a title shot. Now, I know at that point you would have Sean O'Malley in the mix because he has a win over Petr Yan on paper. And then you have the winner of Chito Vera versus Corey Sandhagen. But depending on how the division plays out, this could be a #1 contender fight because we don't know exactly what's going to happen in the future. So this is a very important fight for the division. This is 2 of the best guys in the division, and this has massive stakes on the line, especially for Petr Yan. Merab can afford to have a loss. Yan cannot afford to have another loss in the UFC, which is crazy. I don't believe he'll be cut or anything, but to be on a streak where you've lost 4 out of your last 5 would be crazy for a guy the caliber of Petr Yan. So if you look at the tail of the tape for this fight, you have Yan is 16-4, Merab is 15-4. Yan is ranked number 2 in the UFC official rankings. Merab ranked number 3. Yan is 30 years old. Merab is 32 years old. Yan is 5'7". Merab is 5'6". Yan has a 67-inch reach, and Merab has a 68-inch reach. So a 1-inch reach advantage for Merab and a 1-inch height advantage for Yan. Basically, it doesn't matter. They're basically exactly the same in terms of height and reach. You look at Merab Dvalishvili's pro MMA career. Of his 15 wins, 3 by knockout, 1 by submission, and 11 by decision. Of his 4 losses, he's been submitted once, which we'll talk about in a second. You got to put some context on that one. And he's lost 3 times via decision. He comes into this fight on an 8-fight win streak. His last fight was in August of 2022 against Jose Aldo, who, even though Jose Aldo has since left the UFC, he's retired, he's going to go box or whatever, Jose Aldo at this point in time was still one of the best in the division. And Merab went out there and pushed him against the fence and just controlled him. And I thought Jose Aldo, with his anti-grappling, with his takedown defense, I thought he'd be able to win this fight. I thought he'd be able to keep Merab off of him. But Merab is just, so relentless with the clinch, with the grappling, with the takedown attempts, that he was able just to push Jose Aldo up against the fence, knee him to the thighs. He wasn't really able to get him down, but the control time won him the fight. And that's still a solid win over a great fighter in Jose Aldo, who's been known for his anti-wrestling and defensive grappling over his entire career. The fight before that, he fought Marlon Moraes. He TKO'd him. This was all the way back at UFC 266 in September of 2021. He almost lost this fight. He almost got stopped early in the first round, and Marlon Moraes gassed himself out. And then in the second round, Merab came out and just took over because Merab has an unlimited gas tank. And he went out there, took Marlon Moraes down, and just brutalized him on the ground, eventually getting the TKO finish. And then you look at the rest of his wins, nothing really crazy, nothing really stands out. A win over Cody Stamann. This is back in May of 2021. via decision, kind of competitive. I think he won 2 out of the 3 rounds. It's a competitive fight, won it with his grappling, has win over John Dodson, win over Gustavo Lopez. There's really nothing that stands out on his resume outside of the win over Jose Aldo, to be honest. And I want to talk about, his last loss was all the way back in April of 2018 against Ricky Simón. And in this fight, he lost via technical submission, guillotine choke. And what happened is, Merab was winning this fight. He got caught in a guillotine in the late 3rd round, refused to tap, and then the fight ended. And you say, okay, well, he didn't tap, he didn't go out, the fight ended. Well, what happened is he started to get up, a doctor came in, and as he was getting up, the doctor asked him to lay back down. And he was kind of red, he was being choked for like the last 20, 30 seconds. And then all of a sudden, the referee waves it off. I cannot remember who the ref was at this time. The referee waves it off and says Merab lost because he laid down, because it totally weird circumstances. Merab should have a win against Ricky Simón. It should not be a loss on his resume. And also, technically, you should be able to say Merab has never been finished, because that is the only time he's been finished in his entire MMA career. But such a weird scenario. And really, it should be overturned, but it's never going to be overturned. The commissions never, admit fault with anything. So it's never going to happen, but a super weird circumstance to get his sole loss via finish in his entire MMA career. And then he also has a loss to Frankie Saenz, which he lost via split decision all the way back in December 2017. That's 6 years ago at this point. And I know the Ricky Simón fight, is 5 years ago at this point, but it's worth mentioning. But Merab is a much improved fighter since then. Now, if you look at Petr Yan, of his 16 pro MMA wins, 7 by knockout, 1 by submission, 8 by decision. Of his 4 losses, he lost 3 by decision and 1 via disqualification. His last fight was at UFC 280, where he lost to Sean O'Malley via split decision. And if you look at this fight, if you followed the channel at all, you already know my thoughts on this. This fight was a brutal robbery. Petr Yan won all 3 rounds. And he won all 3 rounds, and it was pretty clear. It was a competitive fight. It was not a close fight. One cut in the 3rd round does not dictate the entire round just because he caused him to bleed from one knee. Petr Yan did more damage in the 3rd round. Petr Yan was able to get him down, control him a bit, and just landed better shots in the 3rd round. And he outstruck him in every single round. And I know people are pushing fake stats around. Petr Yan won this fight against a long, powerful Sean O'Malley. And Sean O'Malley had a great performance. But ultimately, Petr Yan was brutally robbed. He looked really good in this fight. The grappling looked really good. The timing looked really good. The striking looked really good. And outside of that one knee, and O'Malley landed a couple good punches. Don't get me wrong. But outside of that one knee, it was a fairly decisive performance for Petr Yan, and Sean O'Malley has very good striking, and this fight was primarily competed on the feet. So I think it showed how good, Petr Yan actually is. The fight before this was the rematch against Aljamain Sterling for the title. This was after the disqualification, UFC 273. This was a very close fight. You had rounds 2 and 3 where Aljamain Sterling was able to get Petr Yan's back. And then you had rounds 4 and 5 where Petr Yan clearly won those rounds. He out-grappled him. He outstruck him. He won those rounds. Then you had round 1 where very little happened. Now, I personally gave round 1 to Petr Yan, but I understand if you gave it to Aljamain Sterling. So it wasn't a robber here, but ultimately he loses the belt now. And he didn't have the belt going into this fight, but he was trying to regain the belt after losing it via disqualification. But, he made mistakes in that 2nd and 3rd round, gave up his back. Once Aljamain Sterling gets your back, you can just not get him off you. The fight before that was an interim title fight against Corey Sandhagen after Aljamain Sterling pulled out. This was a highly technical fight. This was a striking battle. Petr Yan clearly won, looked amazing in this fight. Sandhagen had some moments, but Yan was just a step ahead, looked absolutely amazing in the clinch in this fight, looked good on the feet, and we know how dynamic Corey Sandhagen is as a striker. The fight before that is the fight where he lost the title to Aljamain Sterling, was winning the fight, was on his way to a stoppage win, and throws an illegal knee, and the referee says right in front of Aljamain Sterling, if we have to stop this fight, it's a disqualification. Aljamain Sterling puts on an Oscar-worthy performance, flops around in the cage, doesn't continue, and gets the bantamweight title wrapped around his waist. And this is a moment in time that may haunt Petr Yan for the rest of his career. Because honestly, he's lost 3 out of his last 4 now. And you could make a case that Petr Yan is still pound for pound top 3, top 5 at the bare minimum. Because you look at the Sean O'Malley fight, brutal robbery. You look at the second Aljamain Sterling fight, he lost, but you can make the case that he won the fight. And then the one against Aljamain Sterling, the original one, he was going to win that fight and he threw an illegal knee. And he's in a position now where he's not even ranked. He's not even really close to the title discussion, but if he wins this fight, he'll be right back in it, being a former champion and, putting the context on those losses. But it's just a weird scenario where he throws that illegal knee and it's the butterfly effect. And it just changes the entire trajectory of his career now, where now he's on a 2-fight losing skid and he's going in against one of the toughest matchups in the division in Merab Dvalishvili. And that's what makes this fight so interesting, because there has to be a lot of pressure on Petr Yan. Because if he loses this fight, I don't even know what he's going to say at that point. And he's in a bad spot. He could arguably still be champion. He could arguably have defended his belt essentially 3 times at this point, because he could have defended against Aljamain Sterling, Corey Sandhagen, and Sean O'Malley. But instead, he's in a weird spot where he's lost 3 out of his last 4. Now, when I look at this fight and I look at the skill set here, I see Petr Yan, who's one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the UFC, one of the most well-rounded fighters on the roster. When I look at Merab, I see a guy who just purely wants to wrestle, purely wants to clinch, purely wants to take you down, and use his stamina as a weapon. And I am so happy that this fight is 5 rounds, because it's going to get very interesting. Petr Yan sometimes starts slow. I think it's a little bit over-exaggerated, how people say, oh, he's such a slow starter. I think that narrative's a bit over-exaggerated, but it is a bit true as well. And Merab is a guy whose gas tank is unbelievable, who just constantly looking to grind you out against the fence, constantly looking to grind you down and look to win in that way. Just sap all your energy and then finish you in the later rounds, or just win via decision with his grappling. Now, when I look at their skill sets, there is no doubt in my mind that Petr Yan is the better striker in this fight. If he is able to keep it on the feet, and if he is able to keep his back off the fence, Petr Yan will win this fight. But Merab is going to come out. He's going to look to use that control time. He's going to look to push Petr Yan against the fence, and he's going to look to win on control time and via decision. I believe that Petr Yan is the better wrestler between these two guys, and I believe Petr Yan is the best grappler in the bantamweight division. I believe he is better than Aljamain Sterling. A lot of people just remember Aljamain Sterling getting his back and controlling him, and they're like, okay, well, Aljamain Sterling dominated him in the grappling. They forget the first fight where Yan was stuffing the takedowns and ragdolling Aljamain Sterling. They seem to forget the 4th and 5th round of the second fight where Yan was taking down Sterling and beating him up on the ground. So I really see no advantages for Merab in this fight. Maybe a stamina advantage, but we've seen Yan go a hard 5 rounds with lots of volume, time and time and time again. The 2 fights against Aljamain Sterling, the fight against Corey Sandhagen, the fight against Jose Aldo. He's gone 5 rounds many times throughout his career. And when I look at this fight, I just think the skill gap is far too wide. And I look at Merab's resume. He hasn't fought the best competition. His best win is against Jose Aldo, where he held him up against the cage the entire time. And I think Yan is way too good in the clinch. His takedown defense is way too good. And I think his striking is so technical and he's so defensively responsible, it's hard to clip him. And I just don't see a way for Merab to win this fight. Usually when he's fighting a more skilled fighter, he tries to drain him. He tries to use that grappling to drain him. I don't think he's going to be able to do that against Petr Yan. So the way I see this fight going is Merab looking for desperation takedowns, Merab looking to clinch up and control Petr Yan, and Petr Yan beating him up in the clinch, reversing position, breaking, landing strikes on the feet, beating him up with punches and kicks. The variety of attack that Petr Yan has is unbelievable. Body kicks, leg kicks. He'll destroy your legs. He out-leg kicked Jose Aldo, who is known to have some of the best leg kicks in MMA. And I think the grappling of Petr Yan, because of those 2 rounds where he made a mistake, gave his back to Aljamain Sterling, people forget how good the grappling it is. I think you could see a scenario where you see Petr Yan take Merab down. I think you could see a scenario where you see Petr Yan controlling Merab up against the fence. That's how high I am on Petr Yan's skill set. And what I see here is, for my official prediction, I am going to go with Petr Yan via 3rd round TKO. I think he's going to start off a little bit slow. I think he's going to land some good combinations. I think he's going to stuff some takedowns. I think, Merab is going to get more and more desperate as he realizes he's losing the fight. He's getting lit up on the feet. I think eventually he's going to get over aggressive in the third round. I think he's going to get clipped with a big shot, put down, and finished on the ground. We've seen that he has a great chin. We've seen that Marlon almost put him out. But Petr Yan doesn't have a gas tank that will fail him. If he hurts Merab on the feet, he will find a finish, and he is absolutely vicious. I'll never forget that 5th round ground and pound that he was throwing down on Jose Aldo where the ref refused to stop it. He must have landed, 75 unanswered shots before the ref finally stopped it in the 5th round. So if he hurts Merab, he will not let him off the hook. I think he'll be abusing the legs of Merab. I think he'll be abusing the body of Merab. I think he'll be pumping the jab. I think he'll be super defensively responsible. So you won't really have Merab be able to catch him with massive power and hurt him. And I think Petr Yan is just so well-rounded and so much better than Merab Dvalishvili. I think he's going to go out there and TKO him in the 3rd round. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Who are you picking in this fight? Is anybody picking Merab? Thank you so much for watching the video. If you enjoyed this prediction video, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. And don't forget to like the video. And I will see you in the next video.